Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I have with me Mae Stevens. She is Chair of the Water Practice and Executive Vice President for the Signal Group, and she is also one of our 2021 WWD Young Pros. We're going to talk a little bit about her lived experience, what she has done in her career thus far, and where she looks is trying to take that career moving forward. There are plenty of other videos with our young pros this month. We've already published several of them, and we publish them every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and our website and YouTube. So check those out. You can check out description links in the description below, and we will talk here with Mae to get some more information from her. So Mae, thank you for being on the call and congratulations on being a young pro for 2021.
Thanks so much for having me. This is great. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you here too. You have such an illustrious career, it sounds like, from all the stuff that you've done. But before we get into that, could you talk a little bit about what your life was like before you got into the water industry? Like, what was your career path that led you to where you are now, and how did water enter the equation?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, actually. So I was, really interested in science growing up. I went to GW or George Washington University, which is right downtown DC, for undergrad. And I caught a little bit of the political bug. I went to college from 2000, 2003. I graduated a little early. And in that time, a lot of things happened in Washington, D.C. We've all lived through it, so I don't have to go through all of it. But living right downtown was really formative for me. And I realized that I was really interested in the intersection between science and politics. That I still wanted to keep some of the science stuff, but I wanted to do politics stuff too. And I thought basically the only thing that I could think of as like a 19-year-old, right? Of like my horizons weren't very big, but the only thing that I could think of is really where those two intersect is in the environmental science world. So I got a bachelor's in environmental science. I worked for a bunch of nonprofit environmental organizations, made my way back to DC, and started working on policy there. And then made my way to what we call in DC the Hill. So I wanted to work for a member of Congress. I thought that would be really interesting, a really great experience, and it definitely was. I worked for Congressman Russ Carnahan from Missouri in 2012. I moved over to Congressman Cartwright's office as well. He's from Pennsylvania, from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I had a great time working for both of them. And then I had the opportunity to work for Senator Cardin of Maryland. And so, and Senator Cardin was very senior on the Environment and Public Works Committee over in the Senate side. And I was going to do his like sort of national environmental work. There was another person that was going to do his more like Maryland specific stuff. The Chesapeake Bay is his very biggest priority. So even though I was going to do national environmental work, that was sort of like the second tier priority after the Chesapeake Bay. Long story short, my counterpart went on paternity leave and then got transferred to a different part of the senator's staff while he was out on paternity leave and just never came back. So I took over the whole portfolio. And that right after that, the Flint crisis sort of broke into the mainstream. It was happening at the time, but really got a lot of national attention at that point. And Senator Cardin, something that a lot of people don't know, Senator Cardin has long been a champion of water infrastructure back to when he was in the Maryland state legislature. He's also been a really, really big proponent of doing something about lead, not just in water, but in paint and soil and all of the places that were exposed to lead. So particularly because Baltimore has a really big problem with lead. At the time, and I think they've been moving in the right direction now, but at the time, this was 2015, every water fountain, every sink in every public school in in Baltimore had been turned off because of lead exposure. And that had been going on for several years. It was like 8 or 9 years at that point. And it ended up being almost a decade before they started moving, to switch over to filters and to try and, rectify some of the stuff. But just that experience for him was really important. And he realized that like with Flint getting the national attention that Baltimore had never gotten for their crisis, he thought, well, this is important. We got to help the people of Flint, obviously, but we got to help the 2,000 other communities all over the country that have lead in their water. And so he kind of pulled me aside and said, okay, I want you to fix the lead crisis. And I thought, no big deal. Sure, I'll do it. But it was very tough. That was sort of the first experience that I got with the water sector, is trying to solve that problem. We ended up introducing the Senate Democrats' response to the lead crisis a couple months later. That was enacted into law, basically as is, with a massive bipartisan vote. It was like in the 90s, the number of senators who voted for it, which is astounding because you don't even get those vote counts for a post office. If you're naming a post office, you don't get that many votes. This was spending billions of dollars on water infrastructure. And sort of at that point, I realized, wow, there's a huge bipartisan effort around this. I've not met a single person who doesn't think we should invest more in water infrastructure. And in fact, subsequent polling bears that out. And so I thought, I really want to dedicate my life to working on water infrastructure, not to mention the fact that all of the people that I talked to, all of the lobbyists that I worked with on the Hill, were, and in the various trade associations, were like absolutely the nicest people. They're some of my very closest friends now. So I'm very excited about that. But I just thought, I want to work with these amazing people who are super great. I want to work on this issue that everybody can get along, because it's not always true in Washington. And there's a lot of work that can be done that's sort of low-hanging fruit. I just got really energized by it. I stayed in Senator Cardin's office for another 3 years after that. And then I decided, because for Senator Cardin, I covered all of agriculture, all of transportation, all of any kind of infrastructure you could think of, energy, any, sort of commerce, oceans, all of the things, space, everything, right? And so part of the problem is I really wanted to just focus on water infrastructure. So I left the Hill to come to Signal. That's where I am today. So it was a long story, but it was an exciting couple years for me. So appreciate it.
Well, I was gonna say that a big chunk of your time is with Senator Cardin, and you did a lot of work with Senator Cardin. I think that in the nomination form that for your initial nomination for young professionals, I think there was like 27 or more bills that were listed that you had been a part of the policy creation and moving things forward and whatnot. What were some of the skills that you learned while working for Senator Cardin that you have taken with you through the rest of your career? I imagine like being able to work across the aisle with people is one big thing, understanding policy at a really deep level, and where and when not to make compromises on policy. Like, how did that shape your career? Could you talk a little bit about like the skills that you learned working for Senator Cardin and how you've been able to utilize those with Signal Group?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and I'm glad that you mentioned the bipartisanship, because every bill that I introduced, aside from like the Senate Democrats' response to the lead crisis, which obviously was not bipartisan because it was just the Senate Democrats, but right after that, that piece got pushed into a very bipartisan bill, right? So we introduced it separately, we put it together. But every other bill besides that, I told Senator Cardin I really, felt strongly that especially the water infrastructure bills needed to be bipartisan on introduction, because that was the way that we could keep this issue in a very bipartisan way. And I think that's really important for the sector. I've seen a lot of issues, excuse me, that are very like common sense issues that become partisan for no good reason, except for that, we just didn't reach across the aisle to the other side, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, right? And suddenly it becomes partisan. And frankly, the way that Washington works, right? We're trying to do policy, we're trying to make the world a better place, we're trying to write legislation, but we're also all trying to get reelected to keep our jobs, right? Because we all believe that like we are really good at what we do, or our views are the ways that the world should be. And so we want to stay there so that we can forward those specific policy goals, right? So you have those two things sort of butting heads all of the time. And what I realized, and I think Senator Cardin is really a champ for this, he's, in a very luxurious position in Washington, D.C., and that he's in a very safe seat. He's very well loved. He's been a public figure for a very long time. Part of the reason why he's very well loved is because he's very, very focused on bipartisanship. Not compromising his morals, obviously, but being very bipartisan in whatever he can do. And he really taught me that looking for sort of the Venn diagram of like, this is what you want, this is what I want, where does that overlap? Only working in that space, right? Because those are spaces where both of us can agree, both Democrats and Republicans can agree that these are problems that need to get done, and to not waste a ton of time in places where they're in your like moral sphere, but you're not in the other party's, moral sphere, right?
Hmm.
And that because those things don't have as good of a chance to get done. And the things that are really really important like need to be as bipartisan as they can. So that's the most important thing I've learned, and that's sort of the thing that I've taken with me off the Hill, because obviously now that I'm a lobbyist, it's clear. I mean, I'm a Democrat. I'm not hiding that in any way, but like the best things that I can do for my client, for all of my clients, is to have really good relationships with everybody, regardless of party, because that means that we can get, bills passed and get, things accomplished for the industry. So that's the most important thing, is bipartisanship for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to pivot just a little bit because I want to get a little bit of personal life
Sure.
layer in here. I wanted to ask about some of your hobbies and things that you kind of do outside of work to decompress and stuff like that. You mentioned that you have some pet bunnies. I'm sure that
Yes.
they take up a good amount of your time. Could you talk a little bit about like what do you do to decompress? Like I it sounds like such a high energy work environment that you have to find a way to really relax when you need to relax.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so I would say during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time with my pet bunnies, Alice Roosevelt and Bungiman Franklin. They're two adorable
Benjamin
animals.
Franklin is so
I
good.
know, I know. My boyfriend's from Philadelphia. Benjamin Franklin is our favorite founding father, so like only seems natural. But he's like very cute. I'll send you photos of them afterward if you want for the magazine.
I would love
But
them.
yeah, but so yeah, I spend a lot of time with them. I also we don't so I think during the pandemic there's like sort of two kinds of households. There are the people who have children in their house and the people who don't. And we don't have kids in our house. And so we had a lot of free time. If we had kids, we would have basically no free time. So I read 90 books over the last year during the pandemic. We watched a ton of Netflix. We basically finished Netflix. Like, I don't know. But the best news ever was that I reached my like 14 days after my second vaccination on Friday. So, and now it's Tuesday as we're recording this. So I have been like out with my friends, living my best life, just seeing people. It's been so lovely. And I think for my job in particular, you really need to be an extrovert. If you're not, you're just going to be really exhausted, because a lot
Mhm.
of it is just meeting with, there's 535 Hill offices. There's about 1,000 people that matter in the administration that have to do with water infrastructure, right? There's, just other lobbyists and all the trade associations and all of the organizations out there, nonprofits, and everybody out there that are working on water infrastructure. And the way to get things done is to have those relationships and to figure out, like I said, where we can all get along. And so I love your question about what my hobbies are, but really I'm very much looking forward to just like seeing my friends again, because all my friends in the water sector are like the people that I need to be talking to. And frankly, it's a lot of fun to see them, even though it counts as work. It's still really fun. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
going to be doing with all my spare time from now on.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, we have time for our last question, and I'm asking
Okay.
this of all the young professionals. I think that this
Okay.
is one that's really important. It's a matter of workforce. We all know that workforce is becoming an increasing challenge for all blue collar work, so to speak, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
difficulty in finding people who have the knowledge and expertise to fill roles that people are retiring from. So the
Yeah.
question to you is, how would you cater to and grab the interests of the next generation of water workers?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So I think the same way that I was so drawn to this is thinking about and making sure that they understand the impact that they will have on basically every single person's life in the United States and every single bit of the economy. So every industry in the United States is dependent on water. Whether that's water infrastructure from their municipal water supply, whether or not they're pulling it directly from a river or groundwater source, it's all connected, right? We all understand now this like one water idea, right? This one water sensibility. And I really think that if people understood the impact that they would have if they came into the water sector, and everybody plays like a very little role in this very massive industry, right? But the fact that you could be part of something that big and that impactful, I think that would really help. And so I'm not, sort of qualified to be able to say, how I would run around and tell people these things. But I would hope that somebody would take that into consideration when they're thinking about, we have a lot of bills in Washington working on apprenticeship programs, water workforce issues, all sorts of things, because we are really concerned about this issue. But I really think that if people understood the impact that they would be having on people's day-to-day lives, and really just the criticalness of our industry to every single thing that happens in the United States and frankly around the world, I think that they would be really motivated to join up and to work in the industry. So that would be my answer.
That's a very good answer, and it's a pretty common one, is talking about shared purpose and values and drawing a direct line from, like you said, one small person in this big giant thing that's going on and how they made a direct impact over here.
Exactly.
Drawing those through lines is so critical. So, well, May,
Excellent.
thank you so much for talking with us and giving us a little more insight into your history and your career and all that kind of stuff. For everyone who is watching, we have links in our description below. You can read a little bit more about May and all of our young professionals. And again, like I said, every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the month of May and the first week of June at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our Facebook page, we have these one-on-one video interviews with our young pros. So check them out, and we have a playlist in the description below, so you can check out all the ones that have already occurred. But May, thank you once again. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I'm so honored by the award, and I really appreciate you having me on. So thanks so much.
We are so honored to have you.